This is Bitnar Talks, the engineer takes on construction. Episode 36. Hi, I'm Piotr Bitnar. Each day I help my clients plan and design building projects through Bitnar Limited, a consulting chartered structural engineer's practice. My biggest passion and the cornerstone on which I've built my business is finding clever solutions for construction projects. I am a chartered structural engineer and a budding software developer, so you can rest assured that I will strive to talk about the best practices and the use of new technologies in the industry. And if you're embarking on a construction project or are involved in planning, designing and building the world around us, you'll find this podcast useful. Approved document T, toilet accommodation. Hi guys, and welcome to Bitnar Talks, your favorite podcast on all matters of architecture, engineering and construction. It is Thursday the 21st of November 2024, and I'm here back with you with the 36th episode and information on approved document T, toilet accommodation. What an end to the last week. Bitnar had the pleasure of taking part in the fundraising gala dinner for the local charitable grant-making trust that works to alleviate physical impairment, poor mental health and homelessness in Kent. What a name, innit? They help our families, your neighbours or relatives make ends meet when their life strikes unexpectedly with hardship of all sorts, from accidents and sicknesses to incapability to cope with economical or mental situations. What is particularly important is that they help locally, making big impact in people's lives. If you can help, go to dwad.org to find out more about them and to chip into local help to local people. Last week we started an outreach campaign as well to gather your views on the construction in England. We are waiting for your engagement, so don't hesitate and just keep on sending them emails and direct messages. When we gather your opinions and experiences, we will be able to combine them for the benefit of all, so please do not hesitate to email us. Together, we will be able to deliver better results. Okay, that is it from me. Let's go back to the delivery of this episode, starting with the recap of the last one first. In the last episode, I talked about the approved document S, infrastructure for charging electric vehicles. Section 0 of that document told us that these guidelines apply to new residential and non-residential buildings, those undergoing significant use changes and major renovations. Mixed-use buildings are included if relevant work is performed. We were also reminded of related regulations including Regulation B, K, M and P. Section 1 covered new residential buildings, where for residential buildings with parking requirement S1 and Regulation 44D are satisfied following the recommendations of the document, obviously. Charging points must match in numbers the parking spaces or dwellings served. If no on-site parking exists, charging points are unnecessary. For spaces without charging points, provisions for future installations are required if costs stay under £3,600 per connection. Building control must verify connection costs with at least 2 quotes, one from a distribution network operator. Section 2 deals with change in use and major residential renovations. When it comes to material change of use, requirement S2 and S3 together with Regulation 44E and 44F apply when adding or removing dwellings. Charging points must match in number the number of new dwellings unless electrical upgrades are needed. Exemptions may apply to historic or traditional buildings. Major renovation, on the other hand, for renovations with 10 plus parking spaces, charging points are required proportional to space of dwellings. capped at 7% of renovation costs. Covered spaces need future-ready cable routes, even if charging points aren't installed. Section 3 talks about new non-residential buildings, and here we're talking about non-residential buildings with 10 plus parking spaces. At least one charging point is required in such case, plus cable routes for every 5 additional spaces. Cable routes should ideally be external, but must be provided in covered parking areas if applicable. Section 4 deals with major non-residential renovations. Here, if after renovation non-residential building is with 10 plus parking spaces, this needs at least one charging point and cable routes for every 5 spaces. Again here, if installation cost goes over 7% of the total renovation cost, we don't need to do it. External charging points also are preferred, with cable routes mandatory in all cases. Section 5 deals with mixed-use buildings. If we don't know how many parking spaces to provide, just follow the dwelling side of things. This sort of combines the residential and non-residential rules. For renovations, the stricter residential standards usually apply. Charging points and cable routes should be installed externally where possible, with internal installations only if needed. EV charging standards are covered in Section 6, which should comply with fire and electrical safety codes like BS-EN 61851 for systems and BS 7671 for installations. Charging points must offer at least 7 kilowatts of output, have a universal socket, and meet safety codes. Cable routes should enable future installations be marked, accessible, durable, and safe. Accessibility and spacing must support convenient future upgrades, so enough space all around that the point where the cables come out. And that will be different from the charging point that stands on the floor, from that hangs on a wall. In this episode, I will move to approved document T, toilet accommodation. So without further ado, let's dive straight into this. In this episode, I'll talk about the statutory guidance contained with the approved document T, toilet accommodation. Anyone who ever struggled by using the public toilets in non-residential buildings should be a little bit happier with new standards coming in new buildings being built, or the old ones undergoing major renovations. The document covers the requirement T1, which is a new requirement altogether, freshly added to the suite on the 1st of October of this year. It is contained within 7 sections, sections 0 to 6, and is somewhat addition to the requirement M access to and use of buildings. It covers the introduction, application guidance, and performance, as well as common design provisions for toilets. And it divides them in types 8 to D. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of this document. Alright guys, starting with the text of the legislation first. Part T, toilet accommodation. Requirement T1, paragraph 1. Toilet accommodation in buildings other than dwellings. A. Must consist of I. Reasonable provision for male and female single-sex toilets, or I, where space precludes provision of single-sex toilets, universal toilets, and B. May consist of universal toilets in addition to single-sex toilets. Paragraph 2. In this requirement, single-sex toilets means toilets facilities which A. are intended for the exclusive use of persons of the same sex, and B. provide wash basins and hand-drying facilities in I. either the toilet room or cubicle, or I. a separate area intended for use only by persons of that sex. Universal toilet means toilet facilities which A. are provided in a fully enclosed room which contains a water closet and wash basin and hand-drying facilities, and B. is intended for individual use by persons of either sex. Requirement T1 does not apply to A, and ensuite facilities in individual rooms for residential purposes. B. Residential rooms in care homes as defined at Section 3 of the Care Standards Act 2000. C. Schools as defined in Section 4 of the Education Act 1996. D. Premises or part of any premises used wholly or mainly for early years provision within the meaning of Section 20 of the Childcare Act 2006 by early years provider to whom Section 40 of the Childcare Act 2006 duty to implement early years foundation stage applies. E. Cellular accommodation in custodial facilities. Simple. So what is the Secretary of State happy with, hey? In Section 0, we are being told that although building regulations do not impose on us maintenance requirements, they do assume the building will be properly maintained. The design should be inclusive of all genders, ages and abilities, whether visiting, living or working in a building. This document deals with unisex or single-sex ambulant toilets, but for the wheelchair-accessible unisex toilets and baby changing or changing places toilets, we are sent to the requirement M Volume 2. We are reminded that ways to satisfy this requirement contained within this document are the minimum standards, and anything over and beyond is acceptable. This requirement holds to buildings other than dwellings, which are either newly built or extended or being worked on, either materially changing it or providing or extending control services and fittings. As ever, the existing building cannot be less compliant after the work, but all new elements shall be up to speed with current regulations. This document gives guidance on the design and layout of universal toilets, ambulant toilets and toilet cubicles. In the gist, we shall follow the priorities of providing single-sex toilets first, with separate or shared hand-washing facilities with unisex toilets, providing if space allows. On the other hand, if there is not enough space to facilitate single-sex toilets, we may consider providing fully enclosed unisex toilets instead. All should be clearly signed though. Section 1 deals with application, guidance and performance. We already know the application, which is buildings other than dwellings, but additionally schools and early year provision premises, cellular accommodation in custodial facilities or en-suites in hotels, care homes or similar are not included. This requirement also extends the provision of facilities under the Regulation 20 of the Workplace Regulation 1992 and directs us to HSC publication L24. This document describes the size, layout, fittings and equipment of universal toilets and single-sex toilets and is an extension to some consideration under requirement M, given ambulant versions of these toilets. We are reminded that other provisions will also be required, like that for the changing of children or disabled people. For other provisions or the calculations of the number of required toilets, we are sent to BS 6465 sanitary installations, but specifically Part 1 and 4. Also, workplace regulations and Sport England's guidance, school premises regulations, education regulations, and NHS England's health building notice 00 Part 2 should be consulted. When it comes to performance, this document concentrates on 4 types of toilets that are considered suitable for the considerations of this requirement. That is Type A, fully enclosed self-contained ambulant universal toilets. Type B, fully enclosed self-contained universal toilet. Type C, ambulant single-sex toilet cubicle, not self-contained. Type D, single-sex toilet cubicle, not self-contained. If there are no clashes with part and requirements, we can choose what to do, either A or B or C or D. So within the same category, either universal or single-sex performance criteria apply. By requirement M, we will need to provide a wheelchair-accessible unisex toilet, so other toilets should be single-sex in the amount charged by the occupancy of the building. Ambulant toilet, where required, should be either Type A or Type C. Single-sex cubicles, doors, should ideally open outwards into the properly sized wash basin area used within single-sex environments. Universal toilets should open into well-lit corridors or circulation spaces. Regarding the spaces and dimensions of the toilet accommodation, we are yet again sent to BS 6465, but this time part 2. Accessible and inclusive toilets layouts are generally provided within the approved document M or BS 8300 part 2. In any case, the layout when entering and exiting and using a toilet or cubicle should cater for the safety, privacy and dignity of users. The minimum space size for each type of toilet is given in next sections, and also an itemized list is provided in the Appendix D. So when you go about planning the space, these are the good places to start, especially if you want to go over and beyond and provide more items within the space. This will necessitate the requirement of bigger space overall, or likely to. Section 2 deals with common design provisions that will apply to all of the types of the toilets. So the general provisions for all toilet accommodation, despite of the type, things like, well, look into BS 6465 for general stuff. That's what we're being told. But the document mentions some aspects specifically, like that urinals should be divided with privacy screens, and one should be provided for little people when separate, and through urinals provided to extend capacity where needed. Toilets, cubicles or rooms should have a toilet paper dispenser, enough space for a disposal bin, and two hooks, one at 1685 mm above the floor level and one at 50 mm over a meter. The door to a toilet cubicle, the toilet room or the universal toilet should typically not obstruct emergency exits when opened. Ideally opened outwards, but have an emergency external opening mechanism if needed. Be suitable to be operated by a closed fist and be light, requiring under 30 newtons of force to open it to 30 degrees and then 22.5 newtons to 60 degrees, and adequately resist the passage of sound. If the doors open inwards, they should not encroach on a circulation space in front of the water closet pan, so-called column of clearance, or activity space. The column of clearance is considered to have a base of 465 mm in diameter. The outward opening, on the other hand, should have a closing bar installed. Functionality is the key throughout, but more about the door features can be found in BS 8300 Part 2. Doors opening onto corridors should be in the recess and have 1200 mm space to the front of them when opened. Direct sight lines from the corridor to the water closet and wash basin should be avoided, whilst reducing the necessity of lobbies, as these make access more difficult. Clear wayfinding should be provided, like signage in the building and at the toilet facility on each and every floor of the building. You guessed it, the universal toilet sign showing a pair of men and women is covered by an international standard, and it should be to PIPF 003 from BS ISO 7001. Controls, fixtures, fittings and alarms should follow standards like for wash basins, that of paragraph 5.4 of approved document M volume 2. A flash mechanism catering for dexterity and strength impaired people. Fire alarms should emit visual and audible signals. Lighting controls that require precise hand movement should be located at 750 mm to 1200 mm above the floor level, but a simple push button not higher than 1200 mm. As is the case in document M, heat emitters need to be either screened or emit heat at temperatures lower than 43 degrees. We are again reminded that the document considers space within the unit, so should, for reasons of piping concealment or vanity units, the space violate the minimums, then the space will need to be extended. We also need to think about contrast between the features and the surfaces they are mounted on. floor to the wall junction, or the light that ideally would be suitable for diverse needs, and for that we are referred to PAS 6463, neurodiversity and the built environment. We are also reminded that baby changing facilities should be provided in addition and should not be contained within any of these 4 types of toilets covered by this document. The baby changing facility should also not be provided in a wheelchair accessible unisex toilet unless it is the only sanitary facility provided within the building. So let us move on to the types of toilets, which are covered in the next 4 sections. Section 3 covers Type A, fully enclosed self-contained ambulant universal toilet. The picture tells 1,000 words really, so I will not describe every detail of the typical toilet layout of any type of these toilets. Please have a look at the provided diagrams in the document. I will only mention the main points pertinent here. For general information regarding universal toilets, we need to revert to volume 2 of document M. So the minimum overall dimension is 985 mm width and 2125 mm length. The door's clear opening width should be over 750 mm, so 750 mm or more, and should not impact the activity or column of clearance space. One way of doing it is to provide outward opening doors, and such should have a horizontal closing bar with hand clearance of 60 mm, at least 500 mm long, at some 900 mm above the floor level, of the diameter between 19 and 35 mm. Column of clearance is a 465 mm diameter circle, and the activity space in front of the water close pan is 600 by 800. Typical features otherwise: horizontal grab rails on both sides walls of the toilet, vertical rails to assist standing up, wash basin and hand drying facilities within the cubicle, a full height door and partitions that is floor to ceiling, space provision for a disposal bin at least 540 mm by 210 mm, small corner shelf above the disposal bin 250 by 150 mm at 780 to 800 mm above the floor, and hooks on wall beside the basin at high and low level. Section 4 covers Type B, fully enclosed self-contained universal toilets, and similar here, I will advise you to have a look into the document's diagram as it shows the whole picture. It is worth noting that the provisions for universal toilets can also be used for self-contained toilets that are part of a single-sex toilet. So, the minimum overall dimension is 1050 mm width and 1685 mm length. The door's clear opening width should be 650 mm or more and should not impact the activity or column of clearance space. Column of clearance here is the same 465 mm diameter circle, and the activity space in front of the water closet pan 600 by 800 mm. Typical features otherwise: a wash basin, mirror and hand drying facilities within the cubicle, a full height door and partitions that is floor to ceiling, space provisions for a disposal bin at least 540 by 210, small corner shelf above the disposal bin 250 by 150 at 780 to 800 mm above the floor, and hooks on wall beside the basin at high and low level. Section 5 moves us to Type C toilets, which are ambulant single-sex toilet cubicle, not self-contained. So the minimum overall dimension here is 920 by 1465 mm. The door's clear opening width should be 750 mm or more and should not impact the activity or column of clearance space. One way of doing it is providing outwards opening doors, and such should have horizontal closing bar with hand clearance of 60 mm, at least 500 mm long at some 900 mm above the floor level, with diameter of the handle between 19 and 35 mm in diameter. Here the same column clearance is 465 mm diameter. the activity space in front of water closet pan 600 by 800, but a clear space in front of the water closet of at least 765 millimeters should be provided. Typical features otherwise: horizontal grab rails on both sides walls of the toilet, wash basin and hand drying facilities with communal space, a full height doors and partition that is floor to ceiling, space provision for a disposal bin at least 540 mm by 210, small corner shelf above the disposal bin 250 mm by 150 mm at 780 to 800 mm above the floor, and hooks on one wall at high and low level. So you see the pattern, most of the things are similar, but the size of the space within and doors vary depending on capability of the person using them. Section 6 deals with the last type, which is type D, single-sex toilet cubicle, not self-contained. Apart from general consideration, I will mention in a moment, we can also install urinals in male toilets following BS 6465 parts 1, 2 and 3 guidance. So now, the minimum overall dimension is 910 by 1740. The doors clear opening width should be 650. The cubicles, the clearance space is 465 for the column and 600 by 800 as an activity space in front of the water closet cubicle. Typical features otherwise are wash basin and hand drying facilities with communal space, a full height door and partitions as previously, the disposal bin of at least space for disposal bin of 540 by 210, small corner shelf of 250 by 150 at 780 to 800 millimeters above the floor level, and 2 hooks on one wall at high level and low level. More information is contained in Appendix D, setting minimum sizes or amount of all elements, like wash basins, hand drying facilities, toilet pan and cistern, disposal bin space, horizontal grab rail, vertical grab rail, horizontal closing bar, small shelf, toilet paper dispenser, mirror height and low hooks. So this is it, folks, the approved document T, toilet accommodations. I hope all of the toilet spotters out there are satisfied with the new regulations and what they can think of when roaming around public spaces. Let's sum it up section by section. Section 0 is an introduction and scope of the document. The building regulations assume buildings are properly maintained and inclusively designed for all genders, ages and abilities. This document outlines the minimum standards for unisex and single-sex ambulant toilets, while requirements for wheelchair-accessible toilets and baby-changing facilities are covered in approved document M Volume 2. The regulations apply to newly built or altered buildings, ensuring new elements meet current standards without reducing compliance of existing parts. Guidance prioritizes single-sex toilets with separate shared hand-washing facilities. If space constraints prevent this, fully enclosed unisex toilets are an alternative. All toilets should have clear signage ensuring accessibility and privacy for users. Section 1. Application guidance and performance. It tells us that consideration includes non-dwelling buildings but not schools, custodial accommodations and workspaces. The document extends guidance under Workplace Regulation 1992, referencing standards like BS 6465 for toilet provision calculations and other regulations for specific environments like NHS facilities. Performance considerations focus on 4 toilet types. Type A, fully enclosed ambulant universal toilets. Type B, fully enclosed universal toilets. Type C, ambulant single-sex cubicles. Type D, single-sex cubicles. Design must align with approved document M for wheelchair-accessible toilets, ensuring adequate single-sex provision based on occupancy. All layouts prioritize user safety, privacy, and dignity, with minimum space requirements detailed in subsequent sections. Section 2 deals with common design provisions. General provisions for all toilet types emphasize privacy, safety, and accessibility. Features include privacy screens for urinals, hooks at two heights at 1050 mm and 1685 mm, and space for bins. Doors that open outwards with emergency mechanisms and minimum force requirements. Additional considerations include clear wayfinding signage, proper contrast for neurodiversity needs per PAS 6463, and suitable lighting and thermal controls. Baby changing facilities must be separate and not included in wheelchair accessible toilets unless no other option exists. Section 3 covers Type A, fully enclosed ambulatory universal toilets. Minimum dimensions of is 985 mm by 2125 mm. Key feature includes clear door opening of 750 mm, outward opening preferred with a closing bar, grab rails on both walls, and disposal bin space of 540 by 210 mm. Activity space being 600 by 800 in front of the water closet pan with a clearance column of 465 mm diameter. Full height doors, small shelf above bin, and hooks at high and low level. Section 4 goes on to cover Type B, fully enclosed universal toilets. Minimum dimensions of 1050 mm by 1685 mm. Provision of 650 mm clear door opening, avoiding clearance space conflicts. Wash basin, hand drying facilities, disposal bin, and hooks should be included too. Similar activity space and clearance requirements as Type A, suitable for integration in single-sex facilities. Section 5, Type C, ambulant single-sex toilet cubicle, not self-contained. The dimensions here go down to 920 by 1465 mm. Doors should remain at 750 mm of effective clear opening width, with a horizontal closing bar if they open outwards. Grab rails on both side walls and communal hand washing facilities should be provided. Activity space are 600 by 800 mm in front of water closet pan, with minimum of 765 mm clear space in front of the water closet. Hooks, bin space, and shelf included, similar to Type A. Section 6, Type D, single-sex toilet cubicle, not self-contained. The minimum space here is 910 by 1740 mm length. Doors with clear opening should be 750 mm. Activity and clearance space similar to Type C. Wash basin and drying facilities are communal. Hooks, bin space, and shelf as per other types. Urinals can be included in male toilets following BS 6465 guidance. Appendix D provides detailed minimum dimensions and requirements for fittings and features like wash basin, grab rails, and mirrors to assist in planning compliant spaces. In the next episode, I'll move to approved document 7, Material and Workmanship. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that the consideration of the approved document T, toilet accommodation, are a bit clearer for you now. If you have any question, reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email. I'm more than happy to help you out. In Bytna, we deal with planning, designing and managing of your projects, and we are always glad to facilitate a free initial consultation to steer you in the right direction. Visit www.bytna.co.uk and reach out to us. Whether your question is if we can help you with your project or what should I do, we will be able to give you a piece of non-obligatory advice. At Bytna, we help our clients design and execute their dream homes or investments. If your building is falling apart, we can also help investigate the reasons behind it and to provide you with an appropriate strategy, design and specifications for the repair. Thank you again for listening. Please voice up your opinions. I'm waiting for you on LinkedIn and I want to hear from you. See you next week. Bitna designs the world around you. Toodaloo.